Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Checkerboard Chat. Once again, I'm Tyler Wombles, that's DeMichael Cole, and we're back to the official sports podcast of the Daily Beacon, bringing you more Tennessee athletics news, updates, and whatever we feel like talking about. There's a pretty important game coming up this Saturday for the Tennessee football team. It's the SEC home opener against the Georgia Bulldogs. DeMichael, just what would you say about this matchup, just getting us started off?
Well, it's going to be the most interesting game of the season so far for a variety of reasons. And I think Georgia's the best team that they've played so far, so it'll be really interesting how this game turns out, and Tennessee's definitely going to have to play their best game.
That's for sure. I mean, this Georgia team is definitely a team that will very likely give Tennessee a challenge. Obviously, you know, the Bulldogs beat Mississippi State last week, pretty handedly beat them.
Yeah.
Mississippi State's a good team. They're ranked number 25 right now in the AP poll. Now, have they announced yet if Jake Fromm is going to be starting as well, or if Jacob Eason's going to play? Or
I don't think they've announced it, but
okay.
I mean the general consensus in the media and everywhere is that Jake Fromm. I mean he hasn't done anything to lose the job, so you know it's not broke.
And for those of you that don't know, Jacob Eason was the starter last season as a true freshman. I think he was the number one high school player in the nation coming out of high school. And he was solid.
He
was okay
played solid last
for a true freshman. But then they got Jake Fromm, who was another very highly lauded player out of high school.
Yeah.
And so he joined the team, and he was the backup to Eason. But then Eason got hurt a couple games ago, and then Fromm, took over the job, and he's played really well. And so now you have a bit of a quarterback controversy for the Bulldogs. DeMichael, just hearing your opinion on this, if you were Georgia, which of them would you start?
I'm starting Fromm, but with starting Fromm, if he, he's a true freshman, so he's coming to Neyland Stadium. I mean, of course, he played at Notre Dame, but I feel like this SEC atmosphere, it'll be different. Not too much different, but it's going to be a different kind of thing for him. And if he struggles too much like he did, I mean, he struggled in the Notre Dame game.
He did.
I mean, the team was able to pull it out, but that was his worst game of the season so far. And if he struggles like he did in that game, then at some point you might consider if they need, some type of jolt in the offense.
Yeah.
You got to give Eason a chance. I mean, he made some big plays against Tennessee last season. Everyone knows he has a huge arm.
Oh yeah.
And he can make all the throws. I think he's the more talented quarterback, Eason is. But, I mean, Fromm hasn't done anything to relinquish the job.
Well, I think that's definitely a good point. And talking about that almost, not a two-quarterback system, but this situation where the Bulldogs will likely start Fromm, but they could go to Eason if the game's not going the way they want to. It's pretty interesting compared to Tennessee's own quarterback situation.
Yep.
Obviously, Quentin Dormady has been the starter this whole time. Jarrett Garantano, they both competed all throughout the offseason. Garantano's played in 2 games, hasn't really played well in either of those appearances. But it was against UMass. He did come in at a pretty critical time of the game.
Late in third quarter.
Yeah, when the game was still really close,
right.
And he was actually benched for Dormady around the fourth quarter. Played against Indiana State a couple games before, ended up throwing a touchdown, but only completed about a third of his passes. DeMichael, just talking about this Tennessee quarterback situation, what have you seen out of both of the players, and what do you expect to see this Saturday?
Well, I feel like Dormady is clearly, he's shown that he's the starter.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think you have to say right now that Dormady is the quarterback that has looked more composed. But then again, Dormady hasn't, looked like a world beater by any means. He struggled in some games, in particular, the Florida game. He had his struggles. And Garantano, when your starter's struggling and you want to put in your backup, like Butch said, he put him in because he wanted him to give the offense a boost.
Yeah.
And that was his chance to earn the starting job.
Sure, yeah.
And he didn't take advantage of that chance. But I don't think it's over yet because, honestly, I feel like it actually was pretty weird how, to me, I believe it was the Indiana State game, when Dormady was in the game, the team ran a lot of read option type principles, but when Garantano came in, you saw a lot of rollout passing.
That's true, yeah.
I was surprised to see that. I mean,
Yeah.
you'd want to see Garantano get a lot more of the read option
Yeah, almost
type
a
play.
switch.
Yeah, because you haven't seen a lot of that.
No.
I mean, we've probably seen him take a couple out of the running back's pocket. I mean, there was one he had the mesh in the fumble, but I feel like that's where he could provide a difference because I know we've seen it in pretty much every game where the defensive end is crashing down or the outside linebacker is crashing down, and Dormady just has a huge hole, but he gives it to the running back, and that could help Kelly out a lot. That could help the wide receivers out. That could help the offensive line out. So Garantano can provide a jolt with the right play calling, I would say, but Dormady is your guy right now. Yeah.
And, I agree with that. I think, obviously, Tennessee has not had the best stretch of 4 games. They are 3-1, but they, obviously the game, to Florida was a game that a lot of fans felt that Tennessee should win. Obviously, the UMass contest was a game that many fans weren't pleased with. But I do agree. I think Dormady is still the guy for this team. I think over the summer and during the offseason, he really carved out a leadership role on this team, and I think the team does respect him and look to him as a leader. And I think it's really interesting that you brought up that whole read option for Dormady and then like a rollout pass for Garantano.
Mm-hmm.
What DeMichael's saying with that, is essentially, Dormady's more of the pocket passer, traditional pro-style player, while Garantano is really lauded as, a dual threat, really athletic guy. A lot of guys have compared him to Josh Dobbs, who is now playing with the Pittsburgh Steelers. I would say some of that play calling may have been the situations of the game, because when Garantano had to go in, they really needed a spark in the passing game. But you're right, yeah, you would think that they would have more of a passing idea for Dormady whenever he's in the game, more of, a handoff and then maybe play action pass.
Yeah, just more pocket pass principles within the game. I mean, it's like they're running the Josh Dobbs type offense with Dormady, and that's not his game.
No, it's not.
That's perfectly fine because you adjust to the quarterback that you have, and I mean Dormady's proven that he can make. I mean, he hit Brandon Johnson on like 6 slant routes, and he's proven that he can make the passes. I mean, John Kelly had 5 receptions in almost 3 or 4 of the games this season, so. He's gotten the ball to the playmakers. It's just, he's inconsistent with it, but he's the guy right now.
Yeah, and like I said, I agree with that. And I think it is interesting talking about Dormady, In the Georgia Tech game, obviously he started out very rough, looked very shaky, sort of came back with the help of Marquez Callaway, obviously, who's been a catalyst for this team this year. And he's done that in several games. I still don't think Dormady looks incredibly confident. I still think he does look very shaky. And against this Georgia defense, that's going to be something
you can mention how he's thrown off his back foot a lot.
Sure, yeah.
And that shows uncomfortability. But he said in the presser early this week that, that's just going to happen sometimes through the flow of the game. So, if he's comfortable doing it, then, maybe the results will start to speak for themselves.
That's true. And we'll have to see that. I actually, going back to Jake Fromm for a minute, I remember I actually did an interview with the Alex Soderstrom of the Red and Black, which is the Georgia student newspaper, and he's one of their football beat writers. And he interviewed me about the game and what I thought about it. And he said, what do you think about Fromm if Fromm does get the nod and is in there, playing in that sort of environment? And I said, I think that's going to be interesting because obviously with the UMass game, a lot of fans did leave, and there wasn't a huge amount of fans. But I don't think there will be a problem with fans at this game. I think they'll be there. Obviously, Tennessee is doing another checker Neyland where they're going to checker sections of the stadium. But I think it will be very interesting to see how does Jake Fromm play in Neyland. How does he –
That's the biggest factor in the entire game, in my opinion, simply because that's Tennessee's advantage. I feel like offensively, Georgia has an advantage. Defensively, Georgia has an advantage. But – Tennessee will be playing at home. Tennessee is going against a freshman quarterback, and Tennessee throws a ton of blitzes at you. And this quarterback hasn't seen, blitzes, how Bob Shoop draws them up.
That's true.
How is he going to react in a 3rd and 5 when he thinks the defensive end is coming, but instead it's 2 linebackers coming right up the middle? Yeah. So how is he going to react when that's happening and things of that nature? So, they could rattle him.
They could, and obviously with that crowd of Neyland Stadium, say you're right by the student section, if you're from the offense or just anywhere on the field, you're going to have that Neyland effect.
Exactly.
And it's I remember I was at the Tennessee game, Butch Jones' first year, when they upset South Carolina.
South Carolina.
I think South Carolina was ranked number 11.
Connor Shaw.
And Connor Shaw, obviously, he's a very good college quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
Hasn't really made a name for himself in the NFL. I think he's still in the Cleveland Browns practice squad. He may have, signed somewhere else, but he was a very good college quarterback. But I remember a key to that game was he could barely get the playoff.
Right.
His linemen could not hear him call the snap. They could not hear him call the cadence.
And that has a huge effect.
Oh, yeah. Well, if you're, false starts, delay of game, just all those sort of things that can derail any offensive drive.
And you got, fast guys off the edge like Kyle Phillips and Darrell Taylor.
Yeah.
They're flying off of the edge. And, man, that could make a huge difference. And Neyland Stadium, it'll be interesting because last week we saw, that stadium was maybe half empty generously after halftime.
There weren't a ton of fans in there to start the game.
Yeah, exactly.
They said the attendance was, I think, 95,000, but that seemed pretty generous.
Right, yeah. That was probably paid attendance.
Yeah.
But it'll be interesting because the fans will have to show up, but we know right now there aren't a lot of fans on Butch's side. But, then again, you have to cheer for the players.
Yeah.
And I feel like, man, if the fans want this game to be a win, which I'm pretty sure they do, they have to show up. And it's the biggest advantage, in my opinion.
And I'm glad you mentioned the whole fans of being on Butch's side thing, because that was actually something we're going to get to as well. Obviously, there's been a lot of talk about Butch Jones, about his job security going into this game. A lot of people feel that he could actually be fired after this game if Tennessee gets blown out or does not play well at all. Some people feel that they'll give him the rest of the season. I'm going to start with you, DeMichael, then I'll sort of say my opinion.
Okay.
If Tennessee loses this game, if Tennessee gets blown out by Georgia, maybe 42-7, 50-0, whatever, like a lot of people are predicting,
right?
What do you see Butch Jones' job security looking like then?
If the team is blown out by Georgia, I honestly think he'll be fired.
Really?
I don't think it'll be the right decision, personally. I
Okay.
don't. But I feel like it's what would happen, and simply because you have a bye week coming up. So, if you're going to fire a coach, you want to try to do it before a bye week so you can work in that new coach, the interim coach, and he can insert his principles in the team, and you get a whole week off plus another week to prepare for the next opponent. So that'd be the best time to do it, simply because right after this game, they have a bye week, and Butch won't have a lot of fans on his side. But the reason I said that I wouldn't agree with it is simply because you have one of the top recruiting classes in the nation right now, one of Tennessee's top recruiting classes. You have a very young team, and you have a lot of weapons. And I feel like, personally, maybe it's too much because a lot of people felt like he should have been fired last year. But
they did, yeah.
I say, you give this team another look next year when these players grow up a year older, and maybe they won't have a ton of injuries, because injuries have hit them hard the last couple of years. There aren't a lot of coaches, period. Maybe Nick Saban, maybe a Urban Meyer, but, if you're losing like Tennessee did last year, 3 or 4 defensive tackles, and you're losing Todd Kelly in your secondary, and, you're having to depend on very young players, you can't expect someone to win an SEC championship. Maybe you can expect them to win the Big 12 or something. But
sure, yeah.
The SEC, it's not going to happen.
It's a different ball game.
It's a different ball game. So I don't feel like it'd be the right decision, simply because you have to give him a chance with a healthy roster, and simply because you have one of the top recruiting classes in the nation right now. And honestly, you lose your head coach, that recruiting class might go into shambles, because if your head coach is gone, there's going to be a lot of more departures within the coaching staff. But I think he's gone if they get beat bad, especially.
Well, and I agree with that. I think that if Tennessee gets beat, I think the fan base right now, there's a lot of fans, whether they should be feeling this way or not, there's a lot of fans that are really down on Butch Jones. I think the way that they feel is that, obviously he has brought the team back to 9-win seasons. He has brought a lot of talent into the program, but at the same time, you can't almost lose to UMass.
Right.
That can't happen as Tennessee. And, Tennessee's going to this game. Obviously, it's so hard to predict with this team, but they're going to this game. Almost everyone's predicting that they will be blown out, and that's not something that John Curry wants to see. Any Tennessee fan wants to see for Tennessee. Personally, I feel like Butch Jones has done a great job of rebuilding the Tennessee program.
No doubt about it.
I think, if I'm grading Butch Jones on different traits, I give him an A on recruiting and rebuilding a program. I think in his 5 years here, he has increased the win total every year. Last year, they had the same number of wins as the year before. But, look at that draft class that they had last year.
And you have to look at where the program was before he got here.
Sure.
And yes, I know a lot of people say it's been 4 or 5 years. I mean, it's time now. But I mean, it happens like this for some coaches.
It does, and I think where Butch Jones really needs to improve, like in this next game, is to show that he and his coaches can get it done.
Right.
The coaching, he has obviously brought the program up, but there's a lot of doubt. Can he actually coach these players the way they should be coached to get these wins? I think it'll be very interesting. I think that Tennessee owes Butch Jones, if they do fire him, they owe him a lot for really rebuilding this program and doing a lot. But at the same time, if you do lose to Georgia in that fashion, there's not a whole lot of arguments that can be made for not looking in another direction.
And let's be honest here. I mean, you got to beat your rivals when you sign up for this kind of a job. I mean, no matter who you are in the SEC, you got to beat your rivals. So for Tennessee, I mean, you have to beat Georgia. You have to beat Florida. I mean, you have to at least be competitive, against Alabama.
Yeah, at least,
so we'll say at least be competitive against Alabama.
Being competitive against Alabama, that might be the toughest of all the games you mentioned. But I think that's just obviously the biggest storyline going into this game. It's going to be very interesting to see what happens, but that's going to wrap it up for us today. Thank you, everybody, for watching. This is Tyler Wombles. That's DeMichael Cole. Be sure to follow the Daily Beacon on Twitter, at UTK Beacon Sports. Follow the Daily Beacon Twitter as well. Follow us on Facebook. You can follow me and DeMichael's personal accounts just to keep up with all the info, Tennessee Athletics info that's going to be coming your way. Keep track of the website. But that's going to wrap it up for us. So, like I said, this is Tyler Wombles. That's DeMichael Cole, and we will see you next week.